The RED KOMODO X does not replace the original Komodo. At least that's what RED tells us. But is that just marketing, or is there more to it than you might think? Stick around until the end, because what I found might surprise you. To find out what really goes on in the RED KOMODO lineup, I first needed to get my hands on the shiny new Komodo X to compare it to my dusty old Komodo. So I made a plan. I could rent a Komodo X for a weekend and do some extensive testing, but looking through all the rental houses in my area, none of them had this camera listed on their website. I was about to give up and almost scrapped this video entirely. As I got distracted and scrolled through my Instagram feed, I saw this post by Video Data, delivering a RED KOMODO X to this rental house near me. There it was. This was my one chance to get a hold of this camera, and its name was 7-Eleven Rent. They still didn't have the Komodo X listed, but now that I knew for a fact that they had one, I sent out an email and waited. And well, as you might already know, it worked out. So massive shout out to 7-Eleven Rent in Hamburg and their amazing team, who not only gave me the Komodo X and more gear to play around with, but also let me use their warehouse to shoot this video. Handling the Komodo X for the first time, I found 10 small but noticeable improvements over the OG Komodo. Integrated V-mount plate. This might be a double-edged sword, as it doesn't allow you to strip down the camera as much as the original Komodo, but it just feels so much more solid. Better I/O placement and more of it. It's nice having more ports on the camera that costs this much. But the biggest deal for me is the improved placement of the SDI port, as on the old Komodo it always was a hassle to reach while following the 12G protocol. Still, it's just as easy to fry the 12G port on the Komodo X. CF cards. These are a much nicer way of storing your media over the CFast cards of the Komodo. But the nicest thing about this is that this is the same media the more expensive Red Raptor lineup uses. A positive locking RF mount. This is a huge improvement over the non-locking RF mount on the Komodo. It's just way more solid and secure, and I think every professional video camera should have a locking lens mount, especially when it forces you to use adapters for your lenses. Further apart screwing points in the bottom. On the original Komodo it was actually quite hard to find small enough screw heads that can get close enough. And then, even when you managed to fit in the two screws, the mounting points were so close to each other that there still was some play. This small but annoying flaw luckily is fixed on the X, as these mounting points are just a bit further apart. Way smoother operation via the touch display. While operating the RED KOMODO via the touchscreen always worked for me, it always was a bit laggy. As soon as you used the touchscreen on the Komodo X, however, you notice how laggy it actually was, as the new display is pretty much like using your phone. Compatibility with the RED DSMC3 monitor. Another sign that the Komodo X basically is a more professional Komodo is its compatibility with the RED Raptor accessories like the RED DSMC3 touch display. Extruding up and down buttons. Small but noticeable are the slightly extruding up and down buttons that basically solve the issue that all the buttons feel the same, making operating the camera in low light scenarios much easier. Improved autofocus. I didn't get to try the autofocus on the Komodo X myself, but it is supposed to be a bit snappier than on the Komodo. An additional record button. Operating the camera, I actually found it quite helpful having another record button in the front. But what's really nice is that both record buttons are half pressable. That means that you basically have two custom buttons on the Komodo X that you can program however you want. This is an exclusive feature to the Komodo X. And as I said, these are only small improvements. We actually didn't even talk about the all new and improved Super 35 global shutter sensor of the Komodo X yet. So what does it look like? And how can it be even better than the original Komodo sensor? Before we get into that, I want to thank you for 2,000 subscribers. However, I'm just getting started and I want to spend even more time crafting these videos. So if you like this content and you're part of the 90% who hasn't subscribed yet, do so. It's completely free and it does help me more than you might think. So yeah, where were we again? Right, the new sensor. First of all, I was really surprised how different the colors actually look. It's worth mentioning that these shots were taken with the Tilt & Mirage VND, but I made sure to have the exact same settings and VND strength on both cameras and even used the same filter for all the shots. So all the differences in color you see is actually 100% caused by the cameras themselves. In this shot you can see that the Komodo leans way more towards green and the X more towards magenta. I personally like the more magenta image a bit more, as it makes the skin tones more pleasing, and it apparently also is way closer to the look of the Red Raptor. You can also see a slight difference in the dynamic range of both cameras, as it has also been improved with the new sensor. Especially when it comes to the shadows, you can push the X just a bit more. The image quality is undeniably better, but doesn't solely justify the big jump in price. There's something else that makes the Komodo X worth quite a bit more than the old Komodo: the frame rates. In the X, RED doubled the maximum frame rates in 6K from 40 FPS to 80 FPS, and the difference is massive. Besides the higher price of the Komodo X and it being a bit bigger and heavier, which is obsolete as soon as you put a V-mount adapter plate on the Komodo, there really are only two minor downsides that I found with this camera. The boot up time takes quite a bit longer, which might become a bit quicker with future software updates, but for now the Komodo wins by a margin. And almost every time I open the RF log, I accidentally hit the front record button. Which is funny because this flaw only exists because of 2 improvements, but it's quite annoying and the button would have been better off on the other side of the lens mount. Getting back to the question, does the Komodo X replace the Komodo? After one day with this camera, I actually realized why RED is right. If we take a closer look at where these cameras come from, it actually gets quite obvious. The original Komodo was designed as a crash cam for bigger productions, as Netflix was getting tired of GoPro footage. But as more and more people, me included, started seeing this camera as a cheap way to get into cinema cameras and used it as an A-cam for music videos and short films, RED responded with the Komodo X. Because while the Komodo was never built to be an A-cam in the indie world, the Komodo X is. It is much more professional, seamlessly blends in with the RED ecosystem, and is just a way more solid package. Therefore, the RED Komodo X obviously doesn't replace the Komodo. Except it does, for all the people who thought the RED Komodo was their dream camera. Bye.